So my son asked me to make him a hoodie for his 9th birthday, and I feel like the luckiest mom in the world knowing that I can deliver on that request. And then I decided I have to make this video because it's the perfect example of why I love using Clo, not just for professional work, but also for personal projects. So for the pattern, I used one from this October magazine. And these are so cool. I'm so impressed by the organization and execution of this product. So let me just open it up for you and show you what I'm talking about. When you open it up, all of these garments are already sewn, so you can pick one that you like. And then these are all line sketches of all of the garments in the book. And then I'll just show you the rest of them, and then I'll come back to the pattern pieces. So my son said he liked this one, and I'll come back to it in a second. So as you get further along in the book, you get to bigger sizes. Generally, smaller sizes at the front, and then the bigger sizes are at the back. So this is the one that my son said he liked. So what you do is look at the line drawing here, and it says number 24. And then there's a description over here about how this garment fits. We like this slash pocket feature on the front here. And I like a hood with like a cowl hood like this. So I look at the line sketch. So it's this one here, number 24, and it says it sizes 110 to 152. So then I have to go to the center of the book, and then you look at the instruction pages. This is general information about how to sew the garment, how to find the pattern pieces on the pattern sheet. So I'll show you this in a second because it's really interesting. On this page is information about how to measure. So my son is actually 117 centimeters or 46 inches tall. So he actually in height fits in 116, but for chest measurement and waist measurement, he was actually over here in 128. So I'll show you how I dealt with that when I get into Clo. And then I find number 24, I think it was. So yeah, number 24. So this is the hoodie, and these are the sizes that it comes in. And again, we'll look at that on the pattern. And then it gives you information about cutting and sewing the garment. And I'm not going to get into the sewing details too much of that right now, because I just want to emphasize the process of how I got this pattern into Clo and into a usable pattern that I got to sew up for my son. So next, you have to look at what pattern pieces you need to cut. So you have to look for pattern sheet D, which is blue. So they come like this. There's these pattern sheets, and there's A, and then on the back of A, there's B, and then this one says E, so I have to find D. Oh, I have D somewhere else. So here is D. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to show you how this looks and how you deal with the pattern and why I love Clo for this part of the process. So another thing my lucky kid got for his birthday was a drone. So I decided this was the perfect opportunity to test it out, which it's not because it just blows the paper around. But here is what the pattern looks like when you unfold it. So you can see there's a million lines all over the place. And what you're supposed to do is put a piece of tracing paper on top of this, find the patterns that you need. So in this case, I needed the blue pattern pieces, and then I needed to figure out which size he was. So then I would trace off. And then I would need to add seam allowance so that I could cut out the fabric and sew it up. So this is where the beautiful Clo workflow comes in. Okay, so let's hop over into Clo, and I'll show you all the cool tricks. So first I import the pattern as an image and apply it as a graphic image to a pattern piece so that I can trace it off. But before I do that, I make sure that I have a ruler in that original image so that I can make sure my pattern is the appropriate scale. And then I trace off all the pattern pieces of the size that I want. So you can see here, it's really nice because I'm able to zoom in and follow those lines exactly. In reality, this tracing off part took me about 20 minutes to do. I'll just speed it up for you for the sake of efficiency. I can also add notches to the appropriate places on the pattern piece. So I'm just refining the lines here, and that's the sleeve. So I have the front bodice, the back bodice, the sleeve, and then I'm not sure what that pattern piece is. This looks like it's going to be the cuff. I'm also labeling my pattern pieces as I go so I can remember where on the original pattern they correspond to. That looks like it's going to be the bottom band. Here's the pocket. And this is the hood. And this is the band that goes around the front of the hood. So then I get my pattern pieces all organized in the 3D window. Making sure I have my grain line on the sleeve pattern pieces here. And then I make sure all my grain lines are lined up properly. So with the base pattern sorted out, I decided to pull in the grading to test out different sizes on an avatar that was the size of my son. So first I figure out what the grade rules generally are for different places on the pattern, and I start applying the grading. So this only took about 20 minutes to do, which means the total time to take an image of the pattern, import it into Clo, trace it off, and apply grading only takes about an hour, which I think is well worth the time because there's so many variables to consider when you're creating a garment, and Clo just allows me to take out so much of the guesswork. Okay, so here's another one of my favorite features in Clo. Once I have the grading applied, we can now look at grade review mode. So this means I can look at the different sizes of pattern, which you can see on the right side of the screen over here, and try on the different sizes on this avatar that is made to fit the measurements of my 9-year-old son. So right now we're looking at the 110 size, and it's clearly too small. It's too short in the sleeves. It's too short in the body. And it doesn't even fit him now, so he's definitely not gonna have any room to grow. Here's the 116 size. Let me just deactivate the hair here, and you can see the 116 almost fits him perfectly, maybe slightly small, but if I were to make a garment that fit him almost exactly, I would probably go with the 116. And then here is the 122, which is perfect because it gives him a little bit of room to grow and a nice amount of ease. So now I can feel confident cutting out and sewing up the size 122. I did add an appropriate fabric. So this is a polar fleece that I made with the fabric creator in Clo so that I can get an idea of how this fabric actually drapes. But I haven't added any details yet. Like there's no zipper at the front, and I haven't brought in the artist panels yet because I just want to get an idea of the size right now. So I decided I'm happy with the size 122. And so you can also see all of the graded sizes side by side in grade review mode. So here's a look at the different sizes. I have the largest on the left and the smallest on the right. Apologies for the hair. I can't get it to stay deactivated, but you still get the idea of how the garment fits. So next I go in and I add some details. I'm going to deactivate this hair again. You can see here I've added a zipper and the panels so I can know exactly the placement of how I want the panels to be on the garment, as well as the pocket placement. And then this was a nice little surprise for me in Clo. I didn't actually have enough fabric to cut out the width of this bottom band across the grain that I needed to. So I just cut off these tabs just to get a little bit more yield out of the fabric, which you'll see in a second here when I go into print layout mode. So once I'm happy with the look of the garment, I need to export this pattern. So I go into print layout mode and I set the width of the fabric I'll be using, and it will give me the most efficient layout to cut out my pattern. So here you can see the pattern in print layout mode, which I then export as a PDF and send to my projector, which I can project directly down onto my cutting board and just put the fabric underneath and cut out the pattern. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of that to show you. So the last cool thing I'll show you here is that print layout mode also works for my graphic images. So when I export this PDF, it will include the graphic images that I have applied, which I brought in at an appropriate scale so that when I export it as a PDF, there'll be an appropriate scale. So when I project the pattern down onto my cutting board, all I have to do is line up the panels with the prints and they'll be in the exact right place as what I see in my 3D window. So here's what that looks like in practice. Here's my projector and it projects down onto my table. Normally I have a cutting mat underneath this, but it wasn't showing up in the video. So I just took it away to show you guys how this actually works. So then I'm bringing out the fabric panel and you can see it lines up perfectly with where the print is on the garment so that I can just now cut it out and everything will be in the right place. So here's how the hoodie turned out. My kid was super happy and I was super happy I could accommodate his request. Happy birthday, Elliot. I love you.